Well, speaking of Twitter, speaking of the left posting asinine things, speaking of the insanity of the left, this is our last news story of the day. Wrap your head around what I'm about to tell you. This is how far they've gone. This is why you don't take them serious. This is why we're not going to take them serious in the next election. One, because they voted for Joe Biden and the way they handled the country in voting for Joe Biden. But they said here on Twitter, and it was trending, that Anne Frank had white privilege. Let that sink in a little bit. I'll say it again. Anne Frank had white privilege. This is what was trending, a trending topic on Twitter from the left. It's so mind-boggling that these people just come out and they post stuff. I've given like a good time to try and think about how possibly can you craft this and morph it and spin it into fitting in your leftist narrative. You just can't. So a topic was trending on Twitter regarding that Anne Frank had white privilege. Yes, that Anne Frank that you all grew up with. The Anne Frank who was forced to go into hiding at the age of 13 because the Nazis were hunting Jews, and she later died in a freaking concentration camp at the age of 15. Yeah, that Anne Frank. Well, on Saturday, one of the top trending topics on Twitter was Anne Frank. The reason there was a famous diary author was trending was because a leftist claimed that Anne Frank had white privilege. Quote, both of these screenshots were taken today. Anne Frank to save you the click that went viral for people saying that she benefited from white privilege. It's getting harder and harder to say with confidence that Jews have a safe and secure future in this country. Anyway, Shabbat Shalom. So Jews have been targeted time and time again, but for some reason, they're never talked about in this whole thing of, racism or whatever the hell it could be. It's always the right that are all these things. The left can just post whatever they want, not get removed off Twitter and just say asinine things. So the original tweet that ignited this freaking outlandish debate was allegedly started by a certain Twitter user, Kalazuko Quote or whatever the hell his name is, or she, her, his, him, I don't know. The user bio reads, Marxist humanist and hedonist utilitarian. So that's who this person is. Yeah, Marxist humanist. Okay, that's what they have in their bio. Hedonist utilitarianism. I think I said Hinduist. My bad. Now I really do sound like Joe Biden. The bio also uses anarchist slogans such as, I want to eat the rich, and ACAB. So he's probably one of AOC's followers. All cops are bastards is what ACAB stands for. Quote, hold on. I want to make sure I say this carefully. Yeah, Anne Frank had white privilege. Bad things happen to people with white privilege. Also, but don't tell the whites that, the Twitter user wrote on July 8th, so just a few days ago. The tweet has since been deleted because, as you would imagine, freaking some major backlash happened, but another user added to it, yes, all white people are safe. No one is saying the Nazis didn't target white people, just that white people can hide behind their whiteness, whereas the Nazi USA black people can't. Go tell black people that whites got it hard. Man. I mean, it's literally just a failure of the education system on all fronts. This person wrote, babe, wake up. They're calling Anne Frank a colonizer on Twitter again. Claire says, it's time for our biannual garbage holocaust take featuring Anne Frank and Jews as white people. It's nuts. And it just went on. I mean, Twitter literally were tearing these leftists apart. Blaze TV personality Steven Crowder, one of the greats, said, I can't believe there are actually people out there saying that Anne Frank had white privilege. Morons. You had writer Catherine Brodsky. Somehow a discussion broke out on Twitter today about how Anne Frank, of all people, had white privilege. A girl literally murdered for being Jewish was considered at best by Nazi as an inferior race. How delusional do these identity politics discourse get? Oh, it will always continue to get worse because they call Ben Shapiro a white supremacist, folks. He's Jewish too. Conservative commenter Matt Walsh, according to the left's doctrine of white privilege, yes, Anne Frank had it. If that makes the concept of white privilege sound insane, well, right, exactly. Writer Ashton Pittman said, if you think Anne Frank had white privilege, you don't know what white means. Race isn't real, it's made up. What makes you white is relative to your society's ideas. In Nazi Germany, she wasn't white. The Nazis saw her as part of the Jewish race and murdered her for it. If Anne Frank could have been transported into the 21st century America, we consider her white. But in Nazi Germany, she wasn't white. She was Jewish and considered part of a separate race. That's why anti-Semitism is a form of racism, even though most Jews appear white. The left don't get that, though. It has to fit their narrative. And when it doesn't fit their narrative, then their narrative just disappears in their own mind. But somehow in that cognitive realm, it still exists and it still makes sense to them. Even though everybody on the outside is going, what the hell are you talking about? It's a fail of the education system, folks. It's a fail of inculcating certain values, whether it be a parent or an educator. This is what happens when you go into a classroom is teaching communism is good, teaching Marxist thoughts, teaching the Frankfurt School of Idiocracy, all sorts of things. So columnist Eric Garcia said a lot of the discourse about Anne Frank and white privilege shows a gross misunderstanding of the history of racism and whiteness has been historically defined. Europe and America's definition of white in the first half of the 20th century is very different from now. Yeah. Folks, if you ask a basic history question to a lot of these people, they don't have a clue on how to answer. Like, not a clue. There's tons of videos out there of conservatives and Republicans going out and asking them, hey, when was our country founded? What continent are we on? How many continents are there? The basic questions that you get in elementary school, they can't answer. Yet a real estate investor, Adam Milstein, Twitter goes full anti-Semitic as tweets about Anne Frank go viral, accusing her of having white privilege. Heartbreaking indeed to see such anti-Semitism in 2022. It's fine from the left, though. What do you mean? The left posted it. They get away with this stuff. Yet Senior Clay Aiken, I think it's time to shut down the internet completely. I mean, I don't really want to hear from Clay Aiken. That guy doesn't really fit my my meter in any sort of morality. Based on what he did to Michael Knowles during one of those Politicon debates, going after him, I don't want to listen to that guy. Novelist Stephen Marsh, this has to be the low point of our discourse, right? I mean, it can't get stupider than this, right? No, it can, and it will. And I mean, you guys, the list goes on. It's one of those things where I could just continue to read tweets after tweets after tweets, do a whole video on it. But the left are going to continue to post this stuff. They're going to continue to get away with it. And this is what I mean by revisionist history, is this is the stuff that people are teaching in schools. There might not be across the board where every teacher's teaching it, but they're already doing things like this. They're revising history. They utilize, what is it, Howard Zinn, I believe the historian in air quotes, is that they utilize a lot in schools, which focuses on revisionist history. Go to Barnes and Nobles and look in the history section. The 1619 project's there, okay? Whatever, if that's how they want to label it, but there's some asinine things that are written in the 1619 project. They're just out there and open that it's history. That it's history. So this is history to the left. This is the stuff that I could see in the next 10 years being in the history books, because this is what they want to believe in. They think that this is real, that she was an actual white person. And they morph people into being white so that it can fit their narrative. So that the narrative's been fit, that they can push it now, and now that's how it becomes history. That's how it becomes reality. They do the same way. They sit there and say that a biological male can be a female, and when they force you into their reality and they demand that that person be a female, even though they're a biological male, at that point, that's when it becomes reality to them, not to anybody else, but to them, and that's how they force it upon your kids in the education system once again, and that's how they revise things. That's how they'll revise biology. That's how they'll revise all of human history. This is how they do it. They take over the language, they take over the history, they take over freaking everything. And this is how society just crumbles. And you're even seeing people on the left, the Democrat Party, like Clay Aiken, say as much, going, this is pretty bad. So when you got yourself, the left eating themselves, the Democrat Party eating themselves over the things that they say, things have gotten bad. I hope you enjoyed that clip from the Bald Brad Show. If you did, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all our future content.